it's seen as largely not okay to admit, oh, I don't know, even though I feel that I should.
Yeah, so I mean, you can see what a great tool to control other people that is.
Yes.
And you can see how little real freedom you have and how little real ability for peace or intimacy or honesty with other people you have while that bullshit's running in you. Now, let's step back and think about it like this for a minute. Let's think about the field of the knowable and the field of the unknowable as ontologic categories. Well, let's think of them as epistemologic categories for a minute.
Can you explain to our audience what the difference is?
Yeah, so ontology is, in philosophy, the inquiry into the study of what is fundamentally real, what exists. And epistemology is, how do we know? Like, do we think this exists because we're measuring it and all getting the same thing, because we're experiencing it, because we're intuiting it, because we're doing math? Like, what is the right process of coming to believe anything that we might believe? And so there's this deep relationship between what we think is real and how we think about anything. And so those are some of the deep categories in philosophy. So let's think about the knowable stuff and the unknowable stuff. Now, Heisenberg set a limit on knowability at the quantum mechanical level, right? Said the position and the momentum of a quantum particle are not simultaneously knowable. And here's the big deal. It wasn't an epistemologic limit. It wasn't we just can't get enough information about it. It was an ontologic limit. They don't both exist at the same time. At the level of the quantum, it does not actually have a fixed amount of momentum and a fixed amount of position. It has something weirder than that, like a probability distribution about how much of those things it has. And so there is a limit to the knowable. And then you say, okay, well, how many quantum particles are there in the universe? And what are all the interactions between them? And how much unknowable is there from that? And it's like, okay, that's a profound set. And Gödel's incompleteness theorem set a limit on the knowable when it comes to mathematics, right? The foundational axiomatic set of math is infinite. Well, you can't know infinite shit. The knowable is always finite. But the unknowable is infinite. So it's important to get first that the unknowable is a larger class than the knowable, fundamentally. And then within the knowable, you have the known and the unknown. And the known is, I have a reasonable confidence margin through whatever process that my understanding of this is pretty good. And the unknown is, this is hypothetically knowable stuff. We just don't know it yet. And there's plenty of that. Within that, the unknown is also a larger class than the known is within the knowable. Now, why am I specifying this? I'm specifying it because if I think that I should know most things, then I actually just don't know the deepest things about the nature of knowability itself. And so that idea, like, oh, someone asked me something I don't know, there's something wrong with me, like, to just realize how ridiculous that fucking thought is.
Yeah,
and
it's... Oh, on you go.
And to instead say, okay, well, there is an infinite class of things I don't know and couldn't know. And then there's a bunch of things that I could know that I don't, and that's forever. And that is fascinating, right? That is enthralling. It's like you get to touch a sense of awe in that. And so I think that reframe of just really getting how vast reality is and how complex and how deep, and then being able to have a totally different humility in relationship to it.
There's an emotional and even spiritual element to this, I think, that people find, or I've found, if you study something in depth, when you go into the subject at first, you can make all sorts of strong and sweeping claims because you don't know enough to know how complicated it is, and that's quite exciting. And then the more that you learn, you realize, I feel like I have to equivocate over everything all the time because everything's so complicated. I wish I could go back to when I knew less. But then the transformation can happen where you can become comfortable knowing that you don't know much.
Yeah, so this is a fun process, right? So we will see, you go to an academic conference and you'll see the top scientists in a domain almost tripping over themselves to not make any real statements because they don't want to say something wrong in front of all the other people that probably know a shit ton of stuff that they don't know that is relevant where what they're saying might be wrong. And then you look at people who are radically less educated about a field and, adamant and passionate about it. So now I basically shared half of the story. So one half is this is a fun story. So related to the knowable and the unknowable, and the known and the unknown within the knowable, our subjective relationship has to do with certainty and uncertainty. And think about it like this: in the pre-modern world, in most of the kind of religious traditions, and maybe not some of the mystical interpretations of them, but at least in the dominant expressions of the religious traditions, certainty had a pretty high value, right? I have certainty that I know who the right God is, and I didn't get the wrong God, and I'm dedicated to that when I'm doing the right things, not the wrong things, and if I get it wrong, I could go to hell instead of going to heaven, or I could reincarnate badly instead of reincarnating well, and I'm certain enough that we can burn women as witches and do crusades and whatever we need to do because we have enough certainty about that rightness, right?
Right.
Now, science started to emerge and have a lot more success in really important things like aiming cannons, and practical physical things, which is actually part of why it proliferated and won. And it acknowledged certain kinds of uncertainties, but it also gave us the capacity for more certainty. Plenty of questions like, do heavy things and light things or dense things and non-dense things fall at the same speed? We were able to start solving some of that stuff, right? And Earth being round or flat, and so even though within the philosophy of science, the purely uncertainty holding it is very deep, a lot of people carried the kind of emotional orientation towards certainty into the way they did science and wanted to be pretty sure that the universe started with the Big Bang, and matter first, and biology and consciousness emerged from neural networks, and this isn't actually the philosophy of science. It's actually an emotional structure of associating certainty with security and value, and associating uncertainty with insecurity, fear, and lack of value, which is an emotional and existential bias leading to a cognitive bias. So then postmodernism saw these flaws, and it said, shit, look at all the things that we fucked up in the name of over-certainty. All the things we were certain about we were wrong later. Even within the sciences, when we were pretty certain we had it almost all figured out around the time of Maxwell's equations, and modern physics fucked it all up. And that's just happened so many times. We really shouldn't ever be certain about anything, because historically we've been wrong about all of it. And whenever we were over certain, we could do really terrible stuff. And so then postmodernism said we should actually embrace uncertainty about everything, and kind of all certainty. And of course I'm radically simplifying all of pre-modernism and then modernity and then postmodernity, but a move towards embrace uncertainty, and any idea, any narrative is just one narrative and isn't fundamentally true, and we don't know. And so then it kind of pathologized certainty and made uncertainty laudable. And I think both of those are untenable. And, we can actually see some major problems in the world from certain interpretations of postmodern that have led to the post-fact world, that have led to increased likelihood for strongman leaders to come in a post-fact world. But I would say part of maturity is having a mature relationship with certainty and uncertainty inside of ourselves. And it's what you could call it epistemic maturity, which is I have a reasonable confidence margin for certainty about these things based on the appropriate processes that I went through to come to it. And I have less confidence margin about these things, and I have no confidence margin about these things, but my security in universe and my self-worth aren't coupled to any of it.